Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I, of course, am James Boyd, joined by my editor, Jim Aiello, after yet another dominant Colts win. Jim, the Colts are 4-1 with 320 plus point victories this season, the most in the NFL after a 34-point beatdown of my Pops's beloved Raiders.
What was his reaction? What did he say? What
Oh,
was
I
he?
yeah, I called him after I filed my story and we got it published. And thankfully they're on Central Time back in the Chicago area. So
Yeah,
called him back in Romeoville and he goes, my team is terrible. My team is awful. He had talked all this trash
not
all
wrong.
week, like his son did a few weeks ago when Illinois played IU, and like father, like
Yeah,
son, we both were eating some crow there. So,
it's in the
yeah, I
blood.
mean, not a lot. Yeah, exactly. I mean, as far as him being upset, I think that was a good thing for the Colts' perspective of things. So, from your angle, your vantage point, Jim, at this point, how impressed are you with this team? Given the level of competition, the Raiders, they're not good. They're 1-4, but just the sheer dominance that we've seen from this group week in and week out.
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's really the only. We talked about this. This is really the only like nit you can pick. The only hole you can put, like push in their resume is they haven't had they don't have a lot of great wins yet, and that's not their fault. And frankly, like even if you don't have great wins, usually when you say that about teams, you go back and look at their wins against bad teams and three, six, nine, even 10 point wins. It's like fine, but like they're kicking the crap out of these teams. It's not even close. Like Daniel Jones wasn't even playing in the fourth quarter. They were up by three scores. God, it was like halftime. This game was over. This game was over at halftime, and they're beating teams every which way. I think the other thing is the last 2 weeks, I would say, with Daniel Jones has been fine, like not bad by any means, not, but just hasn't been like making huge throws or some of the stuff we saw in the first 3 weeks where it was like, holy cow, Daniel Jones looks awesome. And again, not a knock. They don't need him to be Superman right now. They just need him to guide the offense, like call the or run the plays that Shane Steichen's calling, get the ball to the open receiver, and he's doing all that. But they're blowing out teams without really needing their quarterback to be special, which is great. Because, and again, this is not to say that he can't be. He's shown moments this year where he has been special, but for the most part, he's just the conductor out there leading the orchestra. Like, yeah, everything's going great. We're doing fine. Like, we're playing the music, and it's no one can stop it. No one can stop it right now. So, I think the Cardinals will be a somewhat better test, but they just found the craziest way ever to blow a game against the Titans. So I don't know what their headspace is going to be, but yeah, man, like to get to, I was going to ask you like when you were writing the story that you wrote after the game, because you get hesitant to draw major conclusions after a game because sometimes you're in the heat of the moment
Yeah,
and
they're the
and you
best
don't
team
want
ever.
yeah, you don't want to get too crazy, but 4-1, like you and I talked on the phone, and I was like, do you want to pitch this team as like true contenders? And you were like, yeah. So what during the game or during the time where you were talking, where you're like, yeah, I'm ready to say that these guys are like at least AFC contenders. I don't want to go to the Super Bowl just yet. Like that's still early here.
Yeah, I think it's just the way they're doing it because it's very hard for a team to win in the NFL by multiple scores. And one of the best parts about this league is the parity. We love the NFL because even though I get it, the Chiefs made it 3 years in a row to the Super Bowl, but there's like these high, tense, these moments of tension where you don't know, who's going to win any given Sunday, all the cliches, right?
Sure.
And just given the way the Colts performed last year, winning 8 games, which is a respectable number given their quarterback situation last year, but all 8 of them won by one possession. And then you flip to this year and you're dominating teams. Yes, you got a little bit lucky against the Broncos, but you could also say you shot yourself in the foot against the Rams. But your other opponents, they stood no chance. I mean, it
No.
was jarring to see the way they put the belt on the Raiders and just whooped them. I mean, my goodness, I was thinking, hide your kids and hide your wives. So to me, a lot of it has to do with I think the new pieces that you brought in,
Mhm.
bringing a lot more to this team, but also those guys accentuating what you already had. Because I think when you look at the offense, you look at the skill position players that they've had. Now, granted, Tyler Warren's a new arrival, a huge piece of that puzzle, but if you got a quarterback who's as steady as Daniel Jones, who's playing, I believe, at a star level right now, he's able to disperse the ball on time, on target. I mean, when's the last time you saw him make a bad throw, Jim?
No, yeah. He
It's
didn't put the
been
ball in peril. Yeah, it really hasn't been. It's been a couple
exactly.
weeks at least. Yeah.
And so all that does is give other guys opportunities to step up and make plays. I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. is on pace to have the best year of his career right now. Like I said, the arrival of Tyler Warren certainly helps. He's been a huge part of this equation on offense. He's probably in the front running, or at least the top two. I would put him alongside Emeka Ibuka with Tampa Bay as far as offensive rookie of the year so far. You look at Josh Downs. We were all kind of worried going into this week, like, oh man, his production is really down. He hasn't done a lot this season. And then boom, he has a game. So
He
again,
looks so good.
exactly. So I think this one of my biggest takeaways beyond, trying to figure out are they a contender, are they not? I still think there's more tests out there and stiffer
Hmm.
opponents to you have to beat, I think, to really earn that respect. But this feels like it is Chris Ballard's vision sort of manifested.
Yeah.
And you go back to the conversations we've both had with him throughout the years about not getting the quarterback position right. Getting that right is like the biggest domino in all of this because now you're seeing, at least in my opinion, uh, a team that wasn't as far away as they seemed. You know what I mean? And so you've added a lot, I think, on
Yeah.
defense. That's a big part of it too. Latu's coming into his
Yeah.
own. We'll talk a lot about that. Javarius Ward has been as good as advertised. Cam Bynum's been a takeaway machine so far this season. But granted, I'm just very surprised that they're winning in this fashion because that's what great teams do to bad teams. I mean, this is what I would have expected to see from like the Detroit Lions or, someone who is, or like, prior to all the injuries with Lamar Jackson, but like the Ravens put up a ton of points. The Bills put up a ton of points. And the way they're scoring, I think I used the word absurd in my quick story after the game Sunday
Yeah.
because it is absurd to see them operating at this level. And so I'll throw this at you, Jim. Throughout all of that, the teams that I mentioned, those guys have star quarterbacks, but what's really interesting to me, and I want to get your perspective on it, is what do you think of just how balanced they really are? Because as a writer, I'm always wanting to find like that one person that stands out, right?
Right.
Oh, here's that one
Yeah.
person who carried them, or the one guy who led the way. No, I mean through the first 5 weeks of the season, if you told me Daniel Jones has been their best offensive player, I'd be like, okay. And if you told me it's been JT, I'd be like, okay. If you told me it was Tyler Warren, I'd be like, you know what, maybe. So I mean, and I haven't even talked about the offensive line. So the
Yeah.
cohesion, the balance, and how real do you think that is?
It's exactly it's kind of what you said, man. It's kind of like what Chris Ballard's vision for this team is to be you don't want to be quarterback agnostic, but like you don't want to be solely reliant on one player to kind of have to carry the team like we see plenty of other teams in the NFL are. And the weapon we talked about it before the season, like whatever quarterback won this quarterback battle between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson was going to be set up well for success just because the run game with Jonathan Taylor, my goodness, the guy looks like you wrote about it a couple weeks ago. Like he looks like this is the best version of Jonathan Taylor that we've seen, and just full. I know your story was more about how he's kind of completing his game. He's becoming a better pass blocker, better receiver as well. But like, my goodness, he is just like locked in as a runner right now. And I know he didn't even have his best game yesterday, on Sunday, but he looks phenomenal. And then the full like cadre of pass catchers that they have, all the options, like you said. I mean, you highlighted Josh Downs. Like we hadn't seen a ton of him for the first few weeks, and all of a sudden there he is, being kind of the focal point of the offense, along with Tyler Warren. And they're just ripping apart the middle of the field against a susceptible Raiders defense. They didn't need to go outside too much because you know what, they didn't have Alec Pierce. Pittman still got his, but again, they just can beat you every which way, which is they're kind of weaponizing Shane Steichen's mind right now, which is huge because when you have a quarterback that is capable of doing the things that he can draw up, they clearly. I mean, we saw this a few years ago with the Eagles. We even saw it honestly during that first year with Gardner Minshew, like where he drew up some stuff that Minshew was able to get the ball to the right people, and they stayed competitive throughout the whole season when everybody kind of thought they were going to fall off the table. So it is an attack that is as versatile, I think, in the NFL right now as you like. We watched them play against the Rams, say right. The run game is good, but this thing runs through Stafford, right? I mean, Matthew, Kyron Williams is a good player, and I know Sean McVay wants to run the ball, and they have a really good run game, but it runs through Stafford. Like I just think Stafford has a bad game, Rams probably lose, kind of most of the time. I don't think that's the case with this team, frankly. Like Daniel Jones can have a bad game, not that we've seen one yet, but Daniel Jones could have a bad game, and they could still win because they can do so many other things well. You mentioned the offensive line is playing like Best compliment you can pay an offensive line is not to talk about him, right? Like, why
Yeah.
we're not talking about the offensive line, right? They're just not a problem. And Quentin Nelson looks as good as he ever has. Like, man, I think it was 2 weeks ago we got the scare where he was limping off the field, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, that's the offense. Like, that's such a huge part. I remember how much Frank Reich used to talk about like Quentin Nelson is like they considered him a weapon on the offense
Oh,
because they
you know
ran behind him
what?
so much. They pulled him. Yeah,
I just followed up with Shane yesterday and asked about Quentin. And
okay,
he said they treat Quentin like a skill position player, which
that's
I thought was
that's
very interesting and
Frank
sort of a
Reich said the same
compliment.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And it compliments you. And just a little tidbit for those listening. And I actually didn't put this in my story because it didn't really fit. But walking out of the locker room Sunday after the game, after things were kind of clearing out, JT is usually the last one in there. So Jonathan Taylor's walking out and we're walking out with them. And I said, man, must be pretty fun, following 56. Me and Stephen Holder were just, making small talk. And he was like, yeah, I'm following a Hall of Famer. And I was like, oh, well, there you have it. And I threw it back at him. I said, yeah, I said, dude, you're on that same trajectory too. And he looked at me, he's like, I got more work to do. But that
yeah,
is the level of respect they have for Quentin Nelson. And
yeah,
again, he is as great an athlete as you will probably see on an offensive line. And not only
yeah.
just him, I thought Braden Smith stepped up big time against Max Crosby. He had some good reps there. And the young guys, Bernard Ryman, we know of at left tackle, but I'm sorry, Matt Gonzalez, Tanner Bortolini, like you said, we haven't said their names often this season because they're not messing up. All they're
No,
doing is just mowing people down and giving their quarterback time and creating running lanes. And even if it's a little stagnant with the run game, you feel like you're going to break through eventually. And I mean, who cares about 66 yards when you find pay dirt 3 times in the end zone? So big time performances from DJ, from JT. I'm still petitioning to have Lil Wayne go DJ, happen pretty soon. After every Daniel Jones good play, I need the Lil Wayne go DJ going. And so again, yeah, we give a lot of love to Daniel Jones, whatever song you want to play afterwards. Not too serious, I guess, of a pressing matter. I'm sure if I asked him, Jim, he wouldn't really care. But beyond that, I think looking at the defensive side of the ball, I still have questions when it comes to linebacker next to Zaire Franklin.
sure,
I don't think
sure.
Joe Bacci had a great day on Sunday. And,
No,
based off the snaps and how that's kind of played out, they still haven't had that surefire starter next to Zaire. That's the weakest point, I think, of their defense. But for the second time this season, we're talking about a Latu interception. So, what have you thought about his presence? And I know you really dug up some numbers last week to kind of give us, I guess, more insight into just how good he's been, even though he's only got 1 sack. And, hilariously enough, he's got more interceptions than sacks, which I think he'll probably take. He told
yeah,
me he's trying to be the league leader, so far this year.
yeah. I was gonna say who would have had that going into the season? Is that 5 weeks in? Latu Latu is more interceptions than sacks, but hey, he's making big plays, and that's the thing I wanted to highlight, and I think you're gonna get into here, with a story later this week, so I don't want to give away too much, but like Latu Latu is doing so much more than just you know, getting sacks. Obviously, if you look at the True Media has a cool stat called splash rate, and where essentially it takes into account pressures and TFLs and run stuffs and pass stuffs and stops on third and fourth down, where essentially you're getting your team off the field. Obviously, interceptions, fumbles, anything that's like a huge play. Essentially, think about it, fans, as anything that Shaq Leonard used to do for the Colts. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. The king of the splash play was Shaq Leonard, but right now, Leatu Latu is sixth in splash play percentage right now, behind, right ahead of, I'm sorry, Nick Bosa, and a little bit behind Micah Parsons. I mean, he is making plays all over the field that just in impact moments that aren't just like I said, aren't just sacks, but they are. You're getting throwaways from quarterbacks on third downs. You're getting stops on 3rd and 2. He's stopping him from 1 yard. Like he's just doing all the things that you would hope your first round edge rusher would do. And obviously, you want to see the sacks come, but I thought you framed it so well a couple weeks ago when we talked about going up against Jared Verse and the Rams, and I think a lot of Colts fans after last year probably were lamenting Chris Ballard's pick of Laiatu Latu, just being like, well, could have had Jared Verse, like could have had a guy who just like breaks down pockets with sheer power, and he's still an awesome player. I'm not even sure Latu is like in that conversation quite yet because he hasn't done it for quite as long, but right now, man. Like they haven't really had that like hell-raising defensive end, or young defensive end, especially one that they drafted themselves. And that's like the trajectory that Latu I think is on. I don't want to go too crazy because again he's got 1 sack, but like it's you can see him all over the field making huge plays, and I think it's such a big part of why this defense is maybe outperforming what you might think they are. And we talked about a lot, right? Like Lou Anarumo calls complicated defense. You talked to some players on the team that said like it's not easy to comprehend the way
Yeah,
this all breaks down. And so we both thought going into the year might take a minute, right? Like might take a little time before they like get this whole thing on track, and they might lose some games, give up big yards, that kind of stuff. They've had their moments, but for the most part, they've been a pretty strong defense, and I think a lot of the credit goes to Leatu Latu.
absolutely. And he's somebody talking to a few of his teammates. They just love his versatility. And I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons why he's been able to adapt perhaps a little bit quicker than some other people. I guess a quick update on JT Tuimoloau. He's fine from talking to him, his teammates. It's
Yeah.
just that, like you said, Lou acts a lot of his linemen, and so he's coming along slowly, but at the same time, I want to make it clear, like he's not in the doghouse. He's not, sticking it up in practice. It's just a very unique system and one that's probably kind of difficult to grasp if you're a first year player on that defensive line. However,
Yeah.
Latu has a lot of experience, dropping in coverage when he was at UCLA and being inside, being outside, doing a lot of things like that. So this is a little bit more in his wheelhouse. And he is a second year player. And also, he was a first round pick. He's expected to have more of the immediate impact. So, I wouldn't write JTT off for the rest of the season. I wouldn't say Tuimoloau is not going to be a part of the mix. But, for the most part, if you're looking for a positive on that D line, it certainly starts with Laiatu because that's what they've kind of lacked, I think, in years past is having, that next level edge rusher. And he's still not there yet
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
think that, he wants to, get to some of those sack numbers up and start finishing some of these plays. He actually missed a sack, I believe, Sunday, and then DeForest Buckner came and cleaned it up.
Yeah.
DeForest
Yeah.
probably is thanking him a little bit, but little
That's the
things
assist.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Little things like that he's still working on. But I thought overall, again, a dominant day for that defense against a lowly opponent. But as Zaire Franklin told me after the game, we're going to play to our standard, and if you don't meet that, you're going to get ran off the field. That's what he
That's what
told me.
happened.
And that's exactly what continues to happen if you're just not ready for them. And so even hearing that talk from them was very different and a bit surprising in a sense. Talking to Braden Smith, and he was like, yeah, for years, we're always climbing and clawing and trying to get back into the season. This year, we just felt like we were tired of being mediocre. And I was like, wow, okay. Here's some guys who are saying some stuff. Now, Zaire talks all the time. He'll tell me that, straight up. But Braden Smith, he doesn't really say much about the state of the team, how things were, how things used to be. And he was telling me just, looking around the locker room as he's watching Shane talk to Daniel Jones about some play, and Shane's eyes are as wide as ever, and he's there in football quarterback heaven. And then you got Tyler Warren over there, teasing about how his one pass he threw in the NFL so far, the throwaway, would have been a better pass, had he had a little more time. Or just little things like that where they're having fun, laughing,
Yep.
joking. You got Zaire saying, hey, don't talk to me, talk to Shagun. He had the blocked punt. Just little things like that really stands out. He's standing there watching that, and he's like, you know what? This feels like we can do something here. And that's a different type of element that we just haven't had to account for with this Colts team because there's been so much heartbreak, I think, in recent years. So
For sure.
that to me is the part that also stands out as like, okay, how for real are you? And are you done teasing this fan base? Because every year you're always kind of close to being what you could be, and then you fall just short. And so I think that's what also drives them right now, Jim, is can we hang on and perhaps not give into or not have any letdown in our preparation or start feeling ourselves too much because we know this league can humble you fast. And so my follow up to all of that is, does strength of schedule matter in your mind? Like when we were talking about the team, where they're at, are they a contender? Do you care about that? And do you need to see more tests passed by this team before you start, really buying in? Not that we aren't, accepting what we're seeing and taking it as reality. But I still feel like there's a part of this fan base and in us in media where it's like, does that strength of schedule matter as much as we say it does or doesn't?
You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
I think, yeah, it's a yes and no. I will say, like, if you're hesitant to buy into this team, don't be. Like, at least it's the bandwagon's getting crowded. I was looking at like ESPN's power rankings. They have them up at, I think, at number 5. The Athletics' own power rankings have the Colts up at number 7. I'm looking at Austin Mock, who does phenomenal work on our projection model. I think you had some of his stuff in your story this weekend. But he has them essentially as the second highest projected win total now in the AFC, behind only the Bills. They're at 10.6. They have an 83.4% chance to make the playoffs, and they're the second highest Super Bowl odds in the AFC right now at 7.8%, which is it's insane to be talking about the Colts Super Bowl odds in October, so I won't do it much longer. But just keep in mind, it's not just like people in Indy or locally you're buying in this team. These are national writers. This is national models that are all saying this is legit what you're watching. So to answer your question, I do think I want to see them perform against better teams. Because again, like the two teams that really could be playoff contenders, I think, in this league, the Broncos and Rams, they didn't dominate. They obviously barely squeaked by the Broncos, and they could have beaten the Rams, but they didn't win that game. So you'd like to see them, deliver some stronger wins against better opponents, because that ultimately, again, I think that's the reason we all get hung up on this is because what happens in the playoffs, right? Like, that's who you're going to see in the playoffs. Can you beat playoff caliber teams? I remember a few years ago when they made the playoffs with the Phillip Rivers-led Colts team. They didn't have a lot of strong wins. It was a lot of wins over bad teams, and that made you question how good they were going to be. And they were one and done. Pushed the Bills, but they were one and done in the playoffs. So, yeah, the strength of schedule does matter to me. But it's like we talked about at the start of this whole thing is like it matters less when you're just beating the crap out of these teams. Like that's what a great team's supposed to do, and that's what they're doing. So I don't know. I'll throw it back to you though. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I want to say that for real, because it would have fallen off by now. I feel like if once you get a month into the season, 5 weeks into the season, I get your opponents might not be the strongest, but man, I think we would have saw bigger issues by now, or more pitfalls, or even at quarterback, more erratic play. But it seems like with this offensive line, these players around him, Daniel Jones is just in a new state. He's in the flow state. He's in the Avatar state for those who remember my childhood favorite show, the Last Airbender. I mean, that's how he's playing right now. I mean, he's got all the elements working in his favor, right? And so when you look at the strength of schedule, I'm not too concerned about it because of what you've done to the bad teams. Had this been a situation where you're turning the ball over against the Raiders and you're barely trying to squeak out a win. I mean, to win by 34 points in the NFL, that is a lot. That barely ever happens. Also, Pete Carroll, don't kick a field goal when you're down by 1 million. Just go for it. I thought that was very bizarre. And I can only imagine what that fan base is feeling right now. Probably the opposite of what the Colts are feeling right now. But yeah, I do think coming up, there aren't a ton of big tests before we get to the bye week. Looking at the next 3 weeks, you have the Cardinals and the Titans, and then wedging in between the Chargers. I think that Chargers game is probably like your next real big test going out west. And even them, they're kind of, struggling at the moment.
So banged up right now, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not like completely sold on what they're offering or how they'll play. So that's something to keep in mind. But I guess if there's one thing that could hurt this team at this point in time, it is injuries. And now we can get into the biggest injury news of the weekend, that being Spencer Schrader, the kicker. He got ran into by Raiders safety Tristan McCollum and basically blew out his right knee. ACL damage, MCL damage. He's out for the year. And now the Colts are in the market for a new kicker. So your reaction to that, Jim, and just losing a guy who, I mean, you take a gamble on a kicker whenever you get a new kicker, it's always a gamble, right? But I
Yeah.
think early on, not to speak for you, but I mean, what else is there to ask of, the young man when he's playing at that level?
Yeah, he was 13 of 14 on his field goals. I mean, he made all of his extra points. He hit the game winner when you needed him to. Obviously, I know he missed that 60-yarder, but that was a little too much to ask, I think, at that point, even with
Yeah.
these like juice kicker balls. But yeah, man, he's been as good as honest. I all I think about when you say that is like this is the first Chris Ballard bet gone wrong, and not even his fault. Obviously, it's a bad injury, but like everything that Ballard touched, made big decisions in the offseason, has broken his way. This is the first one that's really kind of broken the other way. And again, not Chris Ballard's fault at all. So he's gonna have to find somebody else. Fortunately, there's a lot of these guys on the open market that are probably serviceable. I guess the question I want to ask you is that depending on who they bring in, are you expecting this to affect Shane Steichen's game management anymore? Like, do you think he's going to
That's a good
go
question.
for it more often, or go not probably not go for two? Obviously, those that was like I guess the only area they struggled on Sunday. They go for two stuff wasn't
That
so
was
great, even though they
hilarious.
they were awesome in the red zone, by the way, which is like we talked about that last week. That's been one of the only struggles of the offense. They were phenomenal in the red zone. They couldn't get the 2 point conversions to happen, but. Anyway, I was wondering. I mean, they probably won't go for two more often. You get a kicker in there, like you see Pat McAfee on his Saturday shows. He's got these kids kicking 30-yard field goals. I think we can find a kicker who can make a 30-yard field goal. But I do think it could change the way he operates on fourth downs. I don't know. What do you think on that?
Yeah, it's certainly something to consider. I do think when it comes to just overall aggression, Shane's just an aggressive play caller.
Yeah,
If it's 4th and 1 and they're anywhere near midfield, he's probably going for it. That just feels like that's his nature. But to your point, I think end of game management is something to think of now, perhaps more than you thought before because you were so confident in Schrader that you settled for a 60-yarder originally a couple weeks ago. That's how much confidence he had in his kicker. I wonder if you would have that same confidence in a less experienced guy. I mean, even Spencer Schrader, he wasn't all that experienced, just 2 years into his NFL career.
no, right.
So who do you go out there and pursue and how much confidence or not does that give you? So we all know that at this point in the year, if you're looking for good starters, it's probably bleak at any position, but kicker is always kind of finicky, man. And I expect them to probably bring in, and we'll get this later today, who worked out for the Colts and, who did they take a look at from the NFL transactions log. But beyond that, Jim, I would probably just lean more towards, an older kicker. And I do think that it could make Shane a little more conservative, but not much. I mean, with the offense operating at this rate, you're not really asking your kicker to make a 50-yarder. You're asking them to make, pretty much
Right.
anything like 45 and in because this offense usually, I mean, it's shocking to see them go 3 and out anymore, honestly. And that's the level they've played at. So even looking at Sunday's game, they go 3 and out to start the game, and then they run off 6 straight possessions with a touchdown, which
Yeah.
ties a franchise record and like the most in a row since at least 1993. I wasn't even born in 93. So that's how good they've been.
Can you two things? One, Rigo is the most overpaid player in the NFL right now, easily.
Yeah, I
Second
told
of
him.
all,
I said, man, you really getting over on these people with your job, man.
I mean,
He ain't did no work through the first 5 weeks of the season, but no, the guys love it, and he loves getting teased about it as
what
well.
can he kick? Because he was going to be. What's going on? Like, they didn't let it? They didn't want to let him try an extra point. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I don't know. It was
Who's the
weird.
holder? Who's the holder? Is my
But
question.
okay, so the holder would have been Luke Rhodes, and the snapper would have been Drew Ogletree.
Oh,
According
interesting. I
to
did not consider that.
Shane. Yeah, we were talking to it on the sideline. But I
Okay.
think, and I threw the same question out there on the morning show on 107 Positive Fan, like, why wouldn't they just let Rigo kick? Let's see him kick. The pushback and really the best explanation that I got from one of the listeners of the show and some of the reactions I even got on social media is you probably didn't want to risk Rigo kicking in that moment. Because, like, for example, what if the Raiders run into him and then you're down 2 kickers?
Yeah.
I kind of understand it, and you're probably thinking, well, that's not going to happen. That's just being way overcautious. At that point, you probably do want to try to be as cautious as you can. So, although it's
Yeah.
kind of boring because I wanted to see Rigo kick for the first time since his
Me
college
too.
days, I think that was probably the smart decision there. But also, I was thinking, how many
Fine.
2 point conversions do you have? And I want to give Shane some truth serum and ask him, like, All right, were those like your C and D 2 point plays? Because there's no way he's dialing up like his absolute we gotta have it money 2 point conversion. No, I think those are still somewhere stashed off
Oh,
from this
dude,
team.
I think on the play sheet, he's got his 2 point calls. Like, there's a spot on his play sheet for it. I don't think he called any of them. I honestly don't. Like, that would
Yeah,
be my guess, is that he was just like, let's just run some other like short yardage plays. I don't want to put any of this stuff on film that I like gotta have it plays. I'm with you, man. Like, if you get a chance to, I'm sure he won't answer you on the record. Maybe off the record, if you get a spot with him, just be like, come on, tell me the truth. Like, did you show anything there? Because I just want to know. I mean, just gamesmanship wise, it'd be interesting to know. So,
yeah, just getting
yeah.
to know him a little bit more. I'm like, yeah, there's no way a guy like him would do that to himself. So, I mean, again, we were kind of racking our brains a little bit about this podcast and even some of the stories this week because when the team is
Yeah,
playing
man.
so well, it's like, all right, who do you want to show some love to? Because you can probably pick anybody to highlight and it would be a positive story. Like I said, my one real concern for this team beyond kicker in the immediate future is linebacker. Who do you try to put next to Zaire Franklin? Because Joe Bacci had a couple of snaps in that game where I'm like, man, let Ashton Genty catch a wheel route on him, had a couple
Yeah.
penalties. To me, it showed why he's been a special teamer throughout his career and not a starter. So, if he isn't the answer, do the Colts get a little aggressive there? On the injury front, beyond the kicker, we'll keep an eye on Grover Stewart. He left the game with a biceps injury, and then Mike
Yeah.
Hilton, newly signed cornerback, left the game with a shoulder injury. And those two guys, no updates so far from Shane Steichen on those. We'll see what practice brings this week. But yeah, that's what feels like the only thing that can really knock the Colts off right now is injuries. And
Yeah.
for the most part, they're healthy. The one thing I'll sort of end it on is and I say this in jest, like it's all
Uh
fun, but Anthony Richardson's first pass of the season
oh.
is a completion
Yeah.
to himself. So
It was awesome.
your reaction to that play and just, how far we've come from the conversation being,
I know.
should this guy be starting to, hey, here's a funny play that we probably will never see again this season.
We could talk about the other stuff with him. I think would be, I guess, kind of interesting for a minute, but it did make me laugh. Actually, the part I think I told you on the phone, the part that made me laugh was that second pass dials up a deep shot, and holy cow, it's a miscommunication with with A.D. Mitchell. It's like, whoa, where have we seen that before? Those two
Yeah, and
guys not on
honestly,
the
we
same
might have
page.
buried the lead there. I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but yeah, let's show some love to Ashton Doolin.
Oh
Big time
yeah,
performance. He stepped up. AD Mitchell was still in the doghouse
yep,
from Shane Steichen, and I believe deservedly so.
hundred
And so
percent.
I don't feel like sorry for him, but I think that was the right message to send to AD Mitchell. Is like, even though you're healthy, Alec Pierce wasn't out there. We're not going to play you after you didn't listen to us when it comes to being professional and finishing through the end zone and making sure you don't make yourself a freaking meme, as far as football blunders. I mean, and it happened again.
I know.
So AD Mitchell,
DeRicardo,
I guess you're
just
off the
yeah,
hook because the next guy who does it is always dumber than the guy before. So,
100%.
yeah, but again, shout out to Ashton Doolin. I think again, and just real quick, Jim, he's a guy that I believe you covered. He's been here for a while. You know his story.
Yeah.
Undrafted guy, grinder, gunner, special teams. Went out there, had 2 catches, team on 55 yards. Was he the right person to use as an example for AD Mitchell?
That's it. I was just gonna say. I mean, you beat me to the punch on that. I think that's like the exact kind of guy you want to put in there, for A.D. Mitchell. Just a guy who's been, like you said, a grinder his whole life, a veteran who does all the right stuff. If I remember correctly, I know he went to Malone College. I believe that was like my former beat partner and somebody you work with every day is Joel Erickson. I think his favorite fun fact on that was that Malone doesn't even have a football program anymore. And that's where Ashton Doolin came from. I'd have to double check to see if they
That's just
like,
true. Yeah,
booted it back up or not. But
no, they have no
yeah,
football program. He is
okay,
the first and only person from Malone
that's
to play in the NFL.
it's an incredible stat. And again, he's just a guy who's been a great special teamer for the Colts. And honestly, I feel like a pretty decent receiver, fourth, fifth receiver. Don't get me wrong, but like
Yeah.
a decent receiver anytime they need him to step up. So no, I mean that's the guy you want. A.D. Mitchell kind of like modeling his game after. Not that A.D. Mitchell is short on role models in that lineup. Like honestly, like Michael Pittman, if he turns into Michael Pittman, great. If he turns into Alec Pierce, great. Like I feel
Yeah.
like there's a lot of guys in that locker room, and the wide receiver room, I should say, that he set the right example for A.D. Mitchell. He's just got to take it on himself to do the right thing. Actually, I know you tried to wrap this thing up, and now I'm going to ask you another question. Well, two questions. I'll give you a minute on each. What did you think about the stuff that we saw about Anthony Richardson maybe being open to a trade? I think that came out from ESPN. And the second thing was, I don't think we got your reaction on the pod, at least on the Xavier Howard retirement. Just
Oh
how
yeah, because that
how
happened
surprised.
so crazy
How
last
surprised?
week.
Yeah, we said we did the podcast, and I think he retired either that day or the next day. So yeah, your reactions to both of those kind of out there things.
Yeah, I'll start with Xavier Howard. I think, hey, when Father Time comes knocking,
Yeah, yeah,
open that door, brother. It was kind of funny to have that happen mid-season. I guess it would have been crazier to have it mid-game, like Vontae Davis, the late Vontae Davis did years ago. But
yeah,
from what I understand, the Colts were seriously thinking about demoting him, and
yeah,
and at that point, I don't know if it was reactionary to that or him just knowing, man, I got cooked by Puka. I'm done. I need to just, hang it up. I did think it was funny that in his entire letter, he was talking about how he, wanted to get closer to God and his family. And I was like, man, God must have sent his son Jesus to tell you in person because Puka cooked him so bad that I'm like, the timing of it, I'm like, yeah, you can get closer to God, but I think God has a sense of humor because you could have chose that path. You could have chose to retire before you joined the Colts. And so the writing was on the wall there. And then as far as AR goes, it would probably make sense for him to want to move on. We haven't heard from him, on the record directly, but from both sides of it, if Daniel Jones keeps playing like this, the Colts are going to extend him and give him another contract. And I think just realistically, that does not give a clear path to Anthony Richardson playing here again. And at that
yeah.
point, you might want to try to recoup some draft capital for him. So
Right.
still very early on that front. We'll see how the rest of the
Yeah.
season goes, but certainly something to think about.
Yeah, I was gonna say trade deadline's coming up, and actually, I think Ballard might get more aggressive. And we saw him have a more aggressive offseason. I would be surprised if he had a more aggressive trade deadline, trying to add maybe another linebacker or a
He's only made
cornerback or
one
something.
in-season trade in his
There
first
you,
8 years of his career. So yeah, it was something. Yeah,
I'm
break
not,
from the
I'm not,
mold.
I'm not betting on it. I'm just saying he might be more aggressive this year because again, it's worked out for him before. That said, I don't see an in-season Anthony Richardson trade happening, but could be wrong. Could be wrong. Something to monitor. I'm sure it'll be a storyline that comes up within the next few weeks.
Absolutely. And so that's all we have for this week. Again, the Colts are riding high. They are 4-1. I believe last time I checked, they were in first place in the AFC, which is crazy to say. They're 4-0 in the AFC. So not a lot to complain about. We'll, keep you updated when it comes to kicker and other injuries related to Mike Hilton and Grover Stewart. But the vibes are good in Indy. There's nothing too much to complain about. And I think for one thing, I'll end it on this. I thought about this coming up this week with the Cardinals coming to town. Marvin Harrison Jr. playing for the Cardinals. I thought about Jim Irsay and how much he'd be loving this
Yeah.
team and welcoming, Marvin Jr. back into Indianapolis and just that whole overlap with him and his father. So you really feel for the Irsay family still. And yeah, shout out to the Colts for giving us a lot of positive content over the weeks. It makes my life a lot easier. So we'll talk to you all very, very soon.